Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mountain Lake Journal. I'm Tom Hellick. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo laid out his vision for the new year in his State of the State address, calling on lawmakers to spend billions to rebuild the state's infrastructure and do more to clean up corruption in Albany.
Please welcome the 56th governor of the state of New York, Andrew M. Cuomo.
The governor had already rolled out many of his big-ticket items in the weeks leading up to the State of the State, so lawmakers knew what was coming.
There is no doubt that this is an ambitious agenda. What else did you think I was going to give to you?
For upstate, the governor's $145 billion budget includes $1 billion more for schools next year and $22 billion to fix up roads and bridges.
Upstate New York must remain an economic priority. The cold truth is that this state government shortchanged upstate New York for many years, and that was short-sighted. I propose the largest roads and bridges investment in history.
Cuomo says he wants to invest more to protect the environment.
One of the most effective programs to make our state cleaner and greener is the Environmental Protection Fund. I propose raising the Environmental Protection Fund to the highest level in history, $300 million.
And what many see as his signature proposal, he called for a statewide $15 minimum wage to be phased in over the next 5 years.
This month, 560,000 families live in poverty, and millions of low-wage workers in this state are forced to choose between paying rent and buying food for their families. There is an unhealthy income inequality gap that is only growing. I say lift up the poor and the working families of this state and pay a real decent wage.
When it comes to ethics reform, the governor didn't mention the scandals that brought down both leaders of the legislature. He proposed closing the LLC loophole that allows limited liability corporations to donate unlimited amounts of money to candidates. And he wants to limit lawmakers' outside income to 15% of their $79,000 salary.
And remember, the stronger the citizen trust, the stronger the government's ability. We have a big agenda. We want to do big things. We need to restore the trust to do it.
The governor toned down his fiery rhetoric from a year ago and his demands that teacher evaluations be tied more closely to standardized tests, which angered teachers and parents already unhappy over the rollout of the new Common Core learning standards. Hundreds of thousands of parents had their kids boycott the exams this past year.
Roughly 20% of our students opted out of exams, and in some districts it was high as 90% opted out. Simply put, the education system fails without parental trust, period. Our goal was to restore that trust, and we said we would correct the state education department's Common Core curriculum implementation mistakes and testing regimen.
The governor took credit for downsizing the state's prison system.
I am proud to be the governor who has closed more prisons than any governor in the history of the state of New York.
Although he stopped short of saying he planned to close more prisons, which he did only a few days earlier during a Sunday service at a church in Harlem. The governor also singled out the state police and corrections officers who spent 3 weeks this summer hunting for the 2 killers who escaped from the prison in Dannemora. And he thanked the state police sergeant who shot and captured inmate David Sweat, ending the largest manhunt in New York State history.
The climax of the event was a truly heroic event where a single trooper confronted one of the escapees, and it was just that trooper and that escapee a stone's throw from the Canada border. And the New York State trooper stepped up in the finest tradition of the New York State Police. His name is Sergeant Jay Cook, and he's here today, and we ask him to rise, and let's give him a round of applause.
And finally, the governor talked about the sadness of losing his father, which has led to his call for paid family leave. and his girlfriend Sandra Lee's battle with cancer, which has led to Cuomo's push to expand breast cancer screenings across New York. And with us now is North Country Assemblywoman Jenna Dupree. Thanks for being with us. What did you hear that you liked?
Well, there were many things that I felt were good for the North Country. Certainly the continuation of the Regional Economic Development Councils, the changes in education. Really pleased to see the governor have a very different tone and impact and thoughts on what our public education system needs, changing the Common Core, additional funding. Disappointed that he did not propose the gap elimination totally in this year, left it a 2-year program, and I think that is likely to get changed as the Assembly and the Senate and the governor negotiate the final budget. Increase in transportation. There were a lot of good things that the governor spoke about.
You mentioned the massive infrastructure plan, including $22 billion to fix up crumbling roads and bridges upstate. Is this an investment that's long overdue?
Very long overdue. We've been trying to get increase in CHIPS funding, which is the Consolidated Highway Improvement Program for our local counties and municipalities. They depend on it, particularly under the 2% cap where they can't go out and borrow the money. And instead of doing 3 and 4 miles a year, many of our municipalities have only been able to reconstruct or repair a road maybe a mile, some even less than that, and the bridges are certainly being left unattended, and some of them are in very serious condition. You know, we're looking at the safety and security of not only our local residents who travel the roads every day, but our visitors. We work hard to bring in tourists, and we have to make sure that they're traveling on safe roads. So long overdue. Glad to see the governor make that commitment. Not sure yet how it's going to be paid for. There's been a big question as to whether or not it adds to our borrowing, and if it does, that's not good. On the other hand, we need to do it. We need to commit to it. He also committed some money to water and sewer, and so many of our municipalities, again, have very, very old water and sewer lines, and they need to have them fixed. So I'm glad the state is stepping to the plate and willing to put some money into these very, very needed services.
The governor, of course, pushing his plan for a $15 minimum wage statewide by 2021. Will this benefit a lot of lower and middle income families and workers here in New York?
Well, I think right now we have way too many, particularly single moms, but a lot of families, both parents working, who are working for $9 an hour. And they're working part-time because that's what's available, and they're working 2 part-time jobs, which means they don't have benefits with either job, and they really can't support their families on that, and I understand that. And you know, my husband and I owned a business for years, and there were days where we struggled to pay the bills, and I understand when families are in that position. And in today's economy, where everything is so expensive and so difficult, it's not something I dismiss lightly. So, you know, we also have to look at the other side of it. And I just, they said all this has just sort of come about, and we had some numbers last year. I think they have to be updated with the current figures. But you know, if people who are working a couple of jobs and struggling are able to get food stamps and able to get Medicaid, it helps in some way, and I'm not saying we want to be subsidizing that, but if they get a 75-cent an hour increase in pay and lose those benefits, they can lose more than they've gained. And so I hope that if we find we're at that cusp, that we address that issue also.
At the same time, on the flip side, as you mentioned, are you worried that such a significant boost in wages will hurt small businesses?
I've heard from a lot of small businesses, many of the small business organizations, the Business Council, NFIB, and others have reached out. Their predictions are it could cost 200,000 jobs across the state. You know, I don't know how accurate that number is, and I will do some additional checking on that. Certainly, many of our small businesses are very concerned about it, and it's not just the entry-level employee who starts at $15 an hour. It's those who are already working for employers, and particularly our small businesses. You know, they almost become like family, but obviously, if you bring somebody in at $15 an hour and you have somebody else working at 17, that person expects to get paid more. And it's not just the salary, it's Social Security tax, the FICA tax, workers' compensation, unemployment. Everything adds up, and many of our small businesses are very concerned about it.
On to ethics reform. With the convictions of Sheldon Silver and Dean Skelos, how much of a priority will and should ethics reform be this session?
It's got to be addressed. There cannot be any tiptoeing around anymore. It can't just be window dressing as we have, as unfortunately has happened in the past. I think that there are many younger and newer elected Assembly Democrats who are adamant that there has to be more ethics reform, and I hope that we will really form a good coalition of bipartisan support to bring about ethics reform. If this Assembly and this Senate don't come up with a good ethics reform package at the end of this year, then shame on us. Because if it doesn't happen this year, it never will. Certainly one of the proposals the governor came up with is eliminate, well, at least having no more than 15% of the Assembly salaries in second employment. You know, I work this job full time. There's about 60% in the Assembly right now who are full-time Assembly members, don't have outside income, don't have other jobs. And so I think that that's got to be a focus. I don't know how anybody has another job, quite frankly, the hours that I put in working for the constituents of this district. So I think we have a lot of options. We have a lot of things we can do to improve, and we've got to. The taxpayers of the state of New York absolutely deserve and should hold our feet to the fire to make sure that ethics reform happens this year.
During his speech, the governor boasted he's closed more prisons than any other governor in state history. Now, a few days before his State of the State, while speaking to a church congregation in Harlem, the governor not only stated he's closed the most prisons in state history, but planned to close more. Even though he didn't mention it during his address, are you worried that the administration may target more prisons upstate or here in the North Country?
You know, I personally don't think that we would be targeted again in the 115th district. We've lost 3 of the original 8 that I had when I came into office. We still have 5, and they're all very viable correctional facilities. I am concerned. I'm always concerned. I mean, again, we look at the North Country as a whole, and we have many, many facilities up here. I am concerned enough that I had a discussion over the weekend, actually on Sunday afternoon, with the governor's office asking for clarification on that issue. And I'm looking forward to getting a response back. He chose his words very carefully in the State of the State. There is nothing in the preliminary budget information that I have that indicates any prison closures.
And Janet, there was an uplifting moment when the governor introduced New York State Police Sergeant Jay Cook and thanked him for capturing escaped inmate David Sweat.
That was personally, and for the North Country, I think without a doubt, the best moment of the State of the State address. I knew the governor had invited 25 members of Troop B, including major guests and several of the people who were involved in the escape, to be there. And I was just absolutely delighted to see that the governor recognized Sergeant Cook and thanked him for his heroism and his courage and bringing down Sweat, capturing him. And what a great moment for him, for his family, and for all of us in the North Country who admire the job that he did.
We heard a different tone from the governor than last year when he waged war with teachers and parents over Common Core. Those teacher evaluations are on hold, and after so many students boycotted the tests, do you see other changes to Common Core in the year ahead?
We need to fix the Common Core. I was so pleased to hear the governor finally admit that the Common Core was flawed when it was rolled out. It never should have happened the way it did. I'm not somebody who thinks we should throw it all out. I think but it's got to get fixed. And his comment in the State of the State, which I applaud, is that he has absolutely directed the State Education Department to do it right this time. APPR, again, the admission that teachers should not be judged on and be evaluated on one test score. And our students shouldn't have that stress on them. A few years ago, I was a keynote speaker at the first task force in the North Country to review Common Core. And I said that evening that Common Core will get fixed when parents get angry. And over the last couple of years, parents have gotten angry, and their message has been heard, and that's a good thing for education. It's a good thing for our students, for our parents, for our teachers, for administration and school boards. So I see this as a win-win.
Assemblywoman Janet Dupree, thanks for being with us.